Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Hands-on CISO podcast. My name is Adi, and today I'm talking to Stephen Owen, Group CISO of IQUW. With over 2 decades of experience in security, Stephen advises executive leaders and has expertise in many different aspects of security. He was also recognized as one of the top 100 global leaders in InfoSec. Stephen, how are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you. Good to meet you, Adi.
Amazing. So I think first question I'm going to ask you, because I think you're the first group CISO we've had. What does it mean to be a group CISO versus a regular CISO?
I think you will often see in CISO different titles, whether it be CISO, Group CISO, Global CISO. Often it depends on your remit, often whether it's a group of companies like groups, and a group could be across geographical locations. It so happens ours is in the UK, but you could be across a few companies and countries, and it could be blurred, then it goes into a global. Often you could be a global CISO with a headcount of 1,000 people. So it
Wow,
really depends on what sector, size of company, team size, and the challenges you're faced. So,
amazing.
but at the end of the day, you're solving a lot of the similar problems, but sometimes it's the scale of the problem.
Got it. And well, two questions. One is, how did you even get into security? And then once you got into security, how did you end up where you are now?
Oh, very good question. At heart, so I left home at 16,
Mm,
many years ago, for whatever reasons I won't go through. So I was a late bloomer, as we'd say, as certainly my mother would say. And eventually I made my way to university, which I loved, microelectronics and software engineering. So I went the software engineering route, which was multidisciplined. And I started writing software. And many years later, through different career progressions, 15, 20 years ago, I wrote some software that hosted technology. Now we call it software as a service, but it was for an investment bank. And it was the first time they did use this hosted technology. So one of their security people came along and looked at my database of how I did the passwords. And I was using, we call it MD5 to hash the passwords. This is to keep the passwords safe in the database. This is some time ago. He said, he waved his finger at me and said, Steve, you can do better here. Good eye elsewhere, but there's a thing called rainbow tables. And I thought to myself, what are rainbow tables? That was it. I was hooked. And it started to change my mindset of the adversary of what they could do. And from that day onwards, I've been, and I'm still learning constantly more and more about security. The more you know, the less you know. And that's so true in security. And I think that's one of the nuggets of is just continual learning and constant learning. But that was my routine through software engineering. I know some people go through from networking, IT. I come through software, and I would say that's coming into its forefront now because of cloud is software or automation, GPT automation. So now it's like, oh, at last. Okay. And of course, if you speak to my team, they just like, I go on automated Python. Half my team into Python as well. So it's good. So it's a benefit in kind.
Interesting. Yeah, I wouldn't see a lot of benefits of knowing software engineering when you become CISO.
Yes. Yeah. But you do have, with it, you do have weaknesses. But as long as you acknowledge them and you work with your team and they get to know your strengths and weaknesses. So I have some blind sides, so I'll work with my team, but conversely, so it's a team effort. You can't be an expert of all, and it's just working on your strengths and weaknesses of the team and your team matrix. So that's what I would say. One of the sort of advices I would say to any up and coming security lead: you don't have to be an expert of all at all. It's one of your best security controls is your team.
Amazing. Would you say the different roles you've done in security have been significantly different from one?
They sort of blended in a way. So one is solution architecture with a strong emphasis of security, and security architecture and cloud. And that was very, very helpful because you learn about their techniques. Again, it's that adversary mindset of what could potentially happen, how to analyze systems quickly from a black box of what would an adversary see versus as they peel back the covers, think of it as like an onion, as they're peeling back the rings of that onion to understand how they would attack to get to the crown jewels or different elements to exfiltrate data out or where the key areas are. So it teaches you very, very good techniques. But then I morphed into, because I think if I backtrack here, as a security professional, I believe you need several disciplines depending on your career projection. For mine, I wanted, because of my software engineering background, architecture, security architecture. With it, I naturally think you should understand privacy. So I specialized in privacy and also cloud, AWS, Azure, different clouds, containers. So I think you need several understandings. And then I went into threat analytics, threat modeling, risks. And I think it's that you do need some understanding on some of those and a strong appreciation. So at one point, through the National Lottery, I was working with David Bader, who's a fantastic CISO who's moved on from us supporting him and his team. Then I was the data protection officer at the National Lottery for Camelot. So that gave me a strong appreciation of privacy. But at the end of the day, there's such a strong overlap with the security team, whether it's dealing with where the data is. It's a bit more abstract problems of, we call it processing reasons. Why are you using that data? Sometimes that's not so important for security because you understand the value of the data, but it's the reason why you're using it. So it gets your mind thinking. And I think that's now becoming a lot more important with AI, of understanding the reasoning behind things as well. And I'm now seeing from my CISO friends, privacy under the remit of CISOs a lot more. Before, some years ago, you wouldn't have seen that. You'd see it to legal counsel, reporting to a DPO and privacy teams. But depending on the size of the organization, it's happening more and more now that privacy is coming into the CISO's remit because it's such a strong overlap. And the CISO is used to dealing with difficult situations, and it's a lot more efficiency for the company as well and benefit.
Have you seen different ways companies approach security? Like some companies that are more, security aware, very on it, and some companies are like, yeah, we have to do security.
Yes. I've got to be careful. Luckily, a lot
No name.
lots of the companies I've worked for, they have a strong security approach, or they do throughout this journey. And I think the bottom line is companies and directors, board directors go through this journey. Often they don't know. And sometimes they don't know how to phrase the questions. They know from all of the news reports that it's important. And I go back 10, 15 years, and I've seen directors learn as how the market is approached. And it's again very, very prominent now. It's often when you go to companies, often cybersecurity is typically in one of the top 5 risks of that business. Okay, it's very rare that it's not. Okay, and what are they doing about it? So some companies have different cultures. Some companies are, I call it a tick box culture. But I often find those sort of companies, eventually it's only a matter of time, they do get compromised. Even with, they have a level of compliance, they run about, we are PCI compliant or ISO compliant or different essentials compliance. With that mindset of tick box, they run around and what used to be annually or monthly before, instead of living and breathing it daily. But I think, again, that's a journey companies have to go through, and execs as well. So it's up to security leaders, and I think it's up to security leaders to try and talk the same language as execs. And I think that's part of the history of the problem, because I often say security people talk Klingon and execs talk English, maybe different dialects. And and that is part of the historical problem, that some execs have shied away from security folk to say, oh, I don't understand the language. So I think security people also are at fault. And again, I'm always trying to improve as well, how to tell that story in plain English to executives so they understand and their context. And that is an art in itself for CISOs and security leads.
That's so interesting. I remember I was talking to a CISO and I told him that I've been talking to a lot of CISOs and they always seem to be very like nice people, want to talk. And he was like, you must have been talking to some really good CISOs. It was interesting. Okay, cool. So what does your day-to-day look like? Like, what do you do in the office? What are the actual actions that need to happen?
No day is the same. So that's one of the benefits of security. It's very rare that I have what I did yesterday is very similar to the next day. There's always something happening. It can vary. It goes through cycles depending on the time of month or quarterly because of reporting. Certainly in the regulated space, there's a lot of reporting and awareness, oversight by different groups within the company, risk and compliance or audit, risk committees. But suddenly you have to turn around and work with a team and understand the day-to-day problems. So I took some time before this and I looked through some of the interview questions and I mapped out one or two of my things, which I did today, just today. But tomorrow might be different. It'll be a different flavor, because if I just go back to last Friday, I know a lot of CISOs were hit with the Microsoft and CrowdStrike issues. It could have been Carbon Black, it could be another. But that's a typical of you wake up in the morning, it's going to be a different day today, different types of stress. So that just highlights the dynamics. In a way, sometimes it's a bit like a drug, a day-to-day addiction of, fighting in the trenches and the bear fights. But today what was my day today? So I'm looking at my notes now. So first thing in the morning, if I can, I will do some planning of what's today's, next week's, and a bit further in the horizon, just some quiet time focusing. Then, before I open my emails, I'll look at the cyber dashboards and some threat feeds. So I'm trying to compartmentalize my time to get my mind in the right space. So I'm trying to first begin with strategic thinking about today's problems, near problems, what's coming up. Then I look at some of the threat feeds. I believe again in automation and data. So I look at all the data dashboards. Is there anything coming up? Then I have a look at the teams to see, have they sent up any red flags or orange flares? Then I'll start looking at what are the projects we're delivering. Are they on track? And trying to have some foresight of where they could go wrong and try and sort of guide some of the team leads of where they need to improve to keep it on track. So it's just that foresight, strategic thinking. Then it's the upward management of talking to the different stakeholders, my different bosses. Often CISOs, let alone they have a direct report, they could have many bosses from different board risk, CIOs, COOs. Suddenly the CFO has asked you a question. They can range. So everybody is my boss. Even my team, I work for my team, so it's different. They're all my bosses. And I think it's that mindset. So I'm looking to see if anybody's asking questions or I need to field back questions. As I'm approaching the evening, past 6 o'clock, I roll up the sleeves. I do some coding, some data analytics, look at some insights, threat insights, do some mentoring, or attend a round table. So come 8 o'clock, I'll switch off. ready for the next step.
Amazing. Wow, that does seem like a very diverse day. Like every hour is different than the other, and also every full day is different from another.
It is. I know what's coming up next week, but I full well know that it could change 48 hours before. There's always an escalation. It doesn't mean that it's a negative escalation, but there are often, when it's getting bad, you have 2 or 3 different escalations in different subject areas. I'm thinking, well, in actual fact, I often say to myself, could I have foreseen this? Could I have done something about it? But often you can't. It was a left field event. Well, that again, you have to think of the positives. Well, that's made the day interesting. How I learned from it.
Interesting. Do you have a large team?
I have a medium-sized team. There's 10 people in my team. I wouldn't measure that because I would say a couple of my team members, they are the power of 3 or 4 different security people. So I've worked with teams for 10, 20, 30 people. It depends on where that company is. I know some CISOs get hung up about team sizes, but I would say look at the efficiencies of that team and the problems they're solving. So again, instead of doing, let's say, daily checks to a degree, I would say, let's automate that so I can remove half a person from those daily tick boxes to looking at a dashboard, and they can spend better time elsewhere. So it's how you marshal your team and the depth of those skills they have and how you grow them as individuals. And that's how you get to having a high-performing team. You grow them professionally so you can deliver better, they can grow professionally, and it's really exciting. It makes great dynamics.
Right. And what are the different roles you have on a team like that?
So smaller teams, you've got to be versatile and stand up if being counted. You can't, it's very strange to have an isolated. So for example, you might have cyber in the supply chain and they will be doing risk. So to give you an idea, that individual might be doing partnering with a posture assessment of doing third parties, automating it into real-time dashboards, automating if we're doing questionnaires, but suddenly the other half of the day, instead of the traditional heat maps risks, we do quantitative risk and doing that. So we take it to the next level. So basically, I encourage the team to take it to the next level. So security engineer, I've got some fantastic security engineers. They're brilliant. So they might be doing some automation, threat intelligence feeds. So for one recently, instead of buying a tool off the shelf, which would take weeks to deploy and expensive, we took some technology, we call it netflow logs. It's telling us who accesses what. We automated it with open source, and it gives us that level of analysis to help us with other tools. But it so happens the rest of IT said, can we have it as well? So by definition, we've actually also sort of underpinned and supported, provided air under the wings of other team members to deliver who's accessing what. But for us, this was an instrument, a vehicle to answer some other questions we had. So that was the security engineer, the security operations manager, very, very key, hands-on analysts of different levels. I have a BISO, which is quite strange in an organization, but this young lady is just amazing. I dare I say she'll ask for a pay rise, which I shouldn't say out too loud. She is the glue in the team and in the business. She is the friendly face of security and also IT. So often you have in security teams, it can be not a rift, but it can be sometimes friction in the business, which you don't want. This young lady just melts those barriers, and it's fantastic. So it allows you to get better traction on your security initiatives, the engagement, and you indirectly you can measure that as well. So fantastic security control. So I come back to my best security control is my team.
Amazing. Wow. First of all, it's so nice to hear you speak so kindly about your team. Like, it really shows the way you view them.
I'm not sure if they'd say the same, but I ask a lot of them, but they do give a lot. And it's like, I do, and I have a professional responsibility for my even my past team members at different companies, they knock at the door, I would always give up time to help them on their career. It's a responsibility of all leaders.
Amazing. Do you ever feel like you have to be like a bad cop or be very, saying no a lot to different people in the company or even your team?
I learned, and I'm sure I'll have to pay for it if I praise him. David Boda, okay? He's a very, very good CISO, and I learned observed how he negotiated, okay? There's no such thing as no. You give them an options. Depending on how you present that options, there might be 3 or 4, and it's how the psychological aspect works. So, remember that, security people, that plays a big and big part of how you present options to people. Not extremes. And at the end of the day, this is a risk decision. And back to security leaders and potential CISOs up and coming, risk is your best friend. Without saying everything is red, and I would probably change that. You want to start using this language of risk exposure, the annual loss in a financial monetary terms. It's a 1 in 3 year event or 1 in 5 year event if we do this. And this is the potential monetary loss with some evidence in there. So it's more of a objective view than a subjective personal opinion. And I think as you present some options, people see you've been pragmatic. So I'm not saying no, I'm giving them a range of options. With some things, often you say, would I die on the hill for that decision? And some CISOs, at some points in your career, depending on your ethical standings, you will have to say, no, I draw the line on that. That just doesn't chime well with me. It might be one of your bosses who's made the wrong decision. Regardless of my career, I will always then voice it to the risk officer or somebody else saying, no, this is my integrity. I would recommend you do this. As long as you laid out those risk options objectively. And I go back to my chemistry teacher many, 40 plus 50 years ago. When we used to do chemistry and the science, he said, you should write down your science experiment and so somebody could repeat it. Risk is like the same. As you write down your risk statements and how you evolve to it, another security professional should come in within reason and comes the same judgment. That's how risk should be. So that allows you to, you're not saying yes, you're not saying no, you're giving them a set of options. It's a business risk decision. There's some things you might have to die on the hill for or not.
Have you ever been in a company, obviously without any names, but have you been in a company where there was a serious security, event where you had to real time, get working?
Yes.
I guess that's inevitable if you've been working in the field for 20 years.
Yes, there are different degrees. Okay. I'm always cautious because it doesn't take much to pin it for which company it was in my career. So have I had security incidents on my watch? Yes. Have I had a major one? No. Have I had security friends who have had? Yes. Have I learned off from their lessons? Yes, I have. But when I say that, it doesn't mean it was their fault at all. It's how they coped in their teams and their lessons learned. And that's what I'm trying to always evolve. And often what you see in the press is different to CISO roundtable, you close room doors. So you take a pinch of what you hear in the news of CISOs, historically were thrown under the bus, less so now. And I think there is a slight difference of the US and the European market as well. I would say that. So you can infer of the recent CISOs that have claimed have been thrown under the bus. But most CISOs will know some of those decisions weren't taken in isolation. Okay? Most CISOs don't have for example, 150,000, 200,000 spend without any other oversight, if you did get bad financial controls, without the size of the company. So there are other fingerprints on that dagger. That's all I would say.
Interesting. What would you say are the differences between what is said within CISOs, closed doors, the way you learn from each other versus what comes out to maybe the news or when it's big breaches, the media?
I think you gain a level of confidence and with fellow CISOs, and they're all at different journeys in different sectors. And once you often see familiar faces, certainly in the UK round table, in the circuit, you all have very similar overlapping experiences. Yes, I've had that. Oh, yes, I've had that. They talk about the challenges and you share your challenges. And there's always, we call it Chatham House rules, that, you can't attribute who said what, and you try not to anyway. But often you're taking away those learnings of constantly how to improve with your different viewpoints on it as well. And sometimes, occasionally, I pull in their CISO and say, can you give me a Don, who is a great leader. He's moved on recently. He was, I think, part of the TravelX ransomware. He does some great talks about mental health. Really great talks. So I pulled Dom in to give me a talk about the team with men's mental health. But also we'll talk about the events as well, what went well, what went wrong, how to improve, besides the other benefits as well, the hidden mental health aspect as well, which is a big thing in cyber teams. It's not always on a breach. It can be just growing and growing because the constant pressure. We're always under limited resource to a degree, constant pressure, ever-changing demands. So that does take a toll on security leaders and teams.
Interesting. What would you say are the biggest issues right now in the cybersecurity field, which is so quickly changing?
In the last, again, it depends on the sector that you are. If I was on an education or a health hospital in the US, would be a different set of problems. I've been in the insurance or finance sector in the UK. So there is a level of the backstory to this. The classical ransomware is always on the top of the mind for a lot of CISOs. That is changing in waves. It comes and goes, because my analogy is, as different administrations in the US and European do takedowns, it's a bit like squeezing jelly. These groups splinter and the jelly reforms out of your hand, and they reform and splinter, and a new type of attacker forms, and it's ever changing. So there is that and what they go after. But I think the underlying thread, I would say, I think what I'm wary about is, we talk about ransomware as a service. I think there's going to be a lot of expansion of that, not as a ransomware, that capability, whether advanced phishing through AI, readily available models. I think they will get a lot more intelligent and a lot more quicker to take hold and exploit those vulnerabilities. So instead of the crude phishing emails you get, which a lot of good security controls will block, a good GPT block, and I write a lot of prompts in AI and APIs, I can look at different profiles and craft a conversation with an individual with no links. Then once I've got them on the hook, then I send them the payload to click on once that's trust has been established. But to try and do that at volume is difficult and sniper shooting. But I think it will get there. But then suddenly they will also look at vulnerabilities on your web surfaces and others. So I think the advanced attack will get a lot more advanced with this capability. I've seen this in some ransomware groups that a few years ago there was chat histories. This is when the Ukraine and Russia war, when they fell apart, and the Conti notes. When you did the analysis, some of them were doing research about Bitcoins and others and doing their own ledgers. So some of them are far forward thinking of investment, of return on investment. So some of these groups are thinking that way. It wouldn't surprise me over the next 12 months, 14 months, they will get more. There are some very good, I think, was it Palo Alto Unit 42 recently was saying, look, they're getting better, these dormant URLs, domains. So whenever a GPT model is announced, the dormant domains, the lookalikes, the spikes. So it's a very crude, and you can say you can't correlate it too much, but they're very, very aware. They're getting better. That's what I'm saying.
Interesting. How do you cope with that? Like, are there any actions that you are already doing now?
I think the first one is elevating your team awareness and giving them constant skills. So all of my team members have, I call it a 3-year roadmap. This is a professional roadmap of what skills, if they want qualifications, exposure, black hat, PEP Friday afternoon projects, which I'm always keen for. And part of that is some of them are GPTs or haystacks or APIs. How can we make use? So growing the team's awareness in these new technologies, you've got to be 12 months ahead of saying, so when you do face these skills, they understand it. So I think it's creating skills within your team and awareness is the first part. So whether you're assessing third-party vendor security tools, which claim they have it, it could be a claim, they've just got AI in the buzzword, or is there genuine behind it? But at least they've got the base foundation skills to do that analysis. So I'd say it starts with the team and making them stronger and aware it's a professional growth. That's what I would suggest.
Do you think most CISOs are aware of the severity, the potential of this thing? Or is it something that, not so much?
I think the majority are. I think they are. A lot of security vendors, will have it in their badge name, even though they're not, but you can't but see it. Everything's AI. Well, challenge, all right, when you peel back the covers. Maybe not, in fact. So I think CISOs are aware, but businesses, yes. So there's awareness of CISOs, and I think the biggest one for CISOs at the moment is Microsoft Copilot, which behind the scenes it's language models, but Copilot allows, I call it knowledge workers, to complete emails faster, look at their documents within SharePoint, their OneDrives, look at other people's documents. So CISOs are now beginning to wake up and saying, this business wants this. Great productivity, set aside the cost around it, but with it comes challenges that if you don't have your access controls, you need to solve that. Otherwise, you ask your co-pilot who's earning the most salary. And if your access controls of your Word documents aren't battened down correctly, they will soon discover that. So there's some foundations that CISOs need to be aware of. But that's one item where I think this technology will drive CISOs or the CISOs on the forefront. So I would always advocate CISOs try and be at one step ahead of the business, but businesses are adopting at a fast pace, whether it be co-pilots, chats, integration, automation. It's certainly happening in the fintech, insurtech market.
How do you think the field will look if you're looking 2 years, 5 years, 10 years into the future?
Well, very good question.
Thank you.
Really good question. I think it's going to impact us a lot. And you can see the seeds already. So I'm a coder. Sometimes, what was this function? How do I do this? I've got plugins into my integrated development environment. My coding, my speed of coding and delivery has gone up without a shadow of a doubt. So that's of today. So what was, let's say, if I saw squads of developers and junior developers, I think with AI plugins and extra tools in the future, what was a junior grad will become suddenly a senior. Okay, so I think productivity, it doesn't mean job loss, but I think people with ideas to harness that tech will benefit. And if I flip over to security, I think you'll be doing more with less. So the team sizes will be staying the same, but there'll be a lot more analysis. So instead of looking at 3 or 4 different tools, Azure has already got on their Copilot equivalent of give me all of the Azure instances which are publicly exposed. I can write that as a human sentence. So I think we're going to see more of that as we tell me all of my environments which are publicly exposed on my data center, which have got a vulnerability which is exploitable in the KEV database or an EPSS. So I can start phrasing that. And this comes back to it's a data. Often security is a data. So anybody with data, or you can hoard that data, which can be mined, you're setting yourself up for success for the future.
Wow.
We've
How do
covered a
you
lot.
find, or what did you say?
We've covered a lot.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking like, how do you find the time within everything you do, like the actual work that needs to be done, and staying up to date? Because it seems like there's so like every day things are coming out, things are happening. This company got breached, this thing happened, this everything is moving.
It is constant. You can't stay abreast of it all. The more you know, the less you know. You'll always have pet subjects in different verticals. I think, again, it's back to that team. As long as you build your team matrix right, they have different strengths and overlapping. You do lunch and learns within your team. They'll say, oh, I found this recently. And they'll talk about a different threat actor, their different techniques, or suddenly you'll share how to write, we call it micro attack, and using APT to mine different techniques. So I think you've got to bring your team along this so they share what they learn, bring it to life. You've got to set aside time yourself to read these threat feeds and sometimes what's relevant to the business. So it's not for security leaders, depending on where you are in your career, you might have to start learning not just on security, but changes in the industry. So I'm within the Lloyd's market syndicates. There are changes in this area, what different businesses are doing with this level of data and a level of analysis and automation. So that helps you to deliver benefits indirectly back into the business. But I would say try and set aside time for yourself. I'm very bad at that, but try and set aside personal time as well.
What do you think is one thing that CISOs maybe overlook a bit, like something that isn't in the center of their attention that should be more in their center of attention?
I think if I come back to the center ground for CISOs is risk and team culture. I think I come back to always your best security control is your team, the servant leadership and the EQ strengths, building that matrix. You don't want to have people who say yes to you. You want challenging behaviors, and you need that balance in the team and a mix as well, diversity. But it's quite scary when you get that mix and that matrix right. You can deliver magic. To leash your team on that team. I'm growing that same team capability. It takes time in getting that right dynamics, but it's very, very exciting for the individuals themselves and the security team if you get that right. So that was one advice for CISO. Your team comes first in getting that right mix and that balance. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. And I think the next one is, my piece of advice is talk to other CISOs. You're not alone. Okay. You do have overlapping problems. Consider it counseling. Okay. We all have bad days. Pick up the phone to another CISO or attend a round table. You'll soon find familiar faces, familiar stories as well. And I think the final one, piece of advice is understand risk and cons. Because if you can say risk that a CFO understands, the CEO or CTO, CIO, if they understand that language of non-tech, they're more likely to give you budget and resource.
One question and one thing we talked a bit about before we started the interview is the stress in this job. tell me more the way you see it. How do you cope with it?
It is stressful. I think any CISO saying it's not stressful is maybe lying. Some cope with it differently. They have different coping strategies. I'm constantly learning on how to deal with it. And the stress can be from different reasons as well, different trigger points. It could be from a lack of resources to suddenly you have several left field things coming for you, then you have a low grade incident. It could be several compounded together. Or it could be your boss as well. So it's learning how to do it, learning the different coping strategies. I think one way is I talk to my security friends to say, am I barking mad? I've got this, talk to me. And I know, and mutually as well, from CISO friends and security friends, that I know sometimes I'm not barking mad, and they'll give me a different, honest perspective. But what I often do is I'll go, because I'm passionate about cycling, every few years, I'll go off for a few months. And over the last year, I cycled the length of Africa, and a couple of years before that, Madagascar. So that recharges my batteries, even though it's physically it's a bit draining. But I come back and, right, I'm ready for another 2-3 year sprint. And it is a full on sprint before I need to recharge batteries. Otherwise, I'll take a couple of days every quarter. That helps me. I'm learning now that sometimes helps me on a reset, low-level reset. Sometimes the 2-year one is a deeper reset. But I come back full of energy, ready for, all right, I'm 2 years sprinting at full speed. Yeah, so that's my coping strategy. Yes.
Amazing. Do you think people feel comfortable coming forward saying, I'm feeling stressed, overwhelmed, burnt out? Is it something that CISOs talk about?
Some. I think they'll emanate it in different ways. I'm having a hard time at the moment. It's got better. What I do care about is the teams of, it's a good thing the teams can say, yeah, I'm having a hard time, and identifying those alert triggers to say, yeah, look, take time off. You're being Brian, just take time off. Okay. It'd be half a day, send them a little note to say thank you, recognition. It's helping them on that journey. CISOs are often, I find it's rare to find it in leaders and exec leaders that support. It is rare because again, their roles, I'm not supporting it at all, but often they're results driven. I would say, I won't name them, probably 2 in 20 leaders who I think that, wow, yeah, they're really, really good. They have other attributes, but it's rare to find that EQ skill and that supportive skill. And again, you won't find the perfect leader. They'll have strong sense of EQ, technical, leadership, strategic, financial. They always have a blend of skills, but it's rare to find somebody who's like, wow, they're really, really good. But I won't call them out because, yeah.
Well, another thing you told me before is that there are 5 types of CISOs. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, 5, 6. Well, there are different types. I think if you start thinking about this way, it frames your mind of what sort of company fits you and vice versa. Say you might have a CISO who is very good at maintaining the status quo, business as usual. There's nothing negative. It depends on where you are at on your journey. You have another type of CISO is post-breach, low maturity. You might have a lead CISO who loves transformation, change, dynamic pace. You might have another CISO who is compliance, based risk, compliance driven. You might have another leader, CISO type, who is maybe even non-tech, is just a very, very strong EQ leadership team, but they're not in isolation. And what I would say, one CISO might have one or two different attributes. So I would say from a CISO's point of view, understand where you are in your CISO career, what type of CISO you are, and what sort of company would fit you. And tell them at the hiring stage as well, saying, I like doing this. You'll get the best out of me if you do this. And you might say, all right, that gives me a 2 or 3 year life expectancy. But man, will I enjoy it, and they will get the best out of you. Yeah, the job isn't for life, not in security, but it's very, very rewarding. So understand what type of CISO you are on your journey, and it will change.
I see. Do you think a person is sort of mainly one type or two types and needs to work around that? Or do you think the same person can be different types in different situations?
I think CISO might grow. So, for example, a post-breach low maturity might grow his EQ skills, his team leadership skills, because you do need to build, the team might be decimated. It might be because of lack of funding. He's got a lot to do to transform in a short space of time to get to confidence, regulators. But again, you've got to bring that. This pointless of buying in lots or third parties. Yes, you can do. But at the end of the day, the people will be carrying the bag of our team. So you've got to bring that team on that journey and grow them and look at their individual requirements. Are they a good fit? How to grow them? So the strength of that leadership or post-breach is quite important. That might grow. You can't just constantly shout and use third parties. So there's a blend. You can see I talked about transformation there. So there's a bleed of this, and then you might hand it over to a BAU CISO or an individual who is you've grown through your team and is ready for his first CISO role, and the softest landing is a BAU team. So it's seeing you go through that progress and you land in his first and you mentor him and he lands that first role and it allows you to move on. So there's different types as well. And then he's seeing, oh, you've left me this, and he will start that journey himself. So there's different types.
I have one final question before we finish. How do you look at bringing together tech and business? You have to know how to speak both the languages and you have to know how to communicate with both and even like be the person in the middle sometimes. How do you think about that?
I partially agree.
Okay.
I think different security leaders will have different roles. And what I find, and I won't name the different boards, earlier on in my career, I remember sitting in a room with full of execs. It was like herding cats. They all had different opinions, and it was. I remember it to this day. I can play it back in my mind of thinking, wow, you put them on this faith maybe to begin with, and you think, oh, they've been anointed by God, they're fantastic. No, they're not. Okay. They've got there somehow. It doesn't mean they're great at making decisions. Okay. And sometimes they have different opinions, but they're different strengths. So just keep that in mind, they're normal. But what I would say is you need to know the personality of your board, of the individuals. There is a trait, a model. You're saying CFO is going to behave in certain ways, obvious. But they might be more analytical, love data. The CEO may not understand tech, but is a great people's strategic thinking. Understand the personality of those individuals, those roles, build relationships, and that will help you tell that story. And just put it into context. So I'm making this up. I don't play golf, but you imagine if you're telling a story about a security issue, you might relate it to a 20-second story about playing golf. Okay. And the different hopping from one hole to another on a hold course, that's what threat actor will do to get to the final hole, to get to the clubhouse. So they have to go, they don't straight away go to the clubhouse, they have to go one to the other. But telling a story that way, which may resonate a bit stronger, the person wanting, the green lights from.
Amazing. Wow, Stephen, I feel like I learned so much. So thank you. And yeah, I think that is it for today. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you as well. And I would say to any other individuals who are leaving college or sixth form, that reach out to me on LinkedIn. I do have mentoring time. I'm always key. And I feel when I go for mentoring individuals, when they land their first job in security, I feel I got the job as well. So there are certain recipes of how to land your success. So I'm always keen for new people to come into the industry. So look, if you don't go to university, look at your brand, maybe do a CompTIA free course, open source project, reach out to mentoring and rotate them. But you can enter, and if you get that right mix, you will land your first job. I know a couple of my main mentees, and it's fantastic. Yeah, it's thrilling when you see they land their first job in a really hardcore security roles.
Amazing, Steve. That is so kind of you. Thank you so much.
No problem. Have a great day and weekend as well.